Hi friends, for today's Nostalgia Fix, we're going to dive right into what I think is the largest collection of retro toys in a store found in Utah. At least, I couldn't find one with more inventory. It's called Rogue Toys. This is also the place I was able to complete a childhood dream of owning all 4 classic Ninja Turtles. It may sound silly and trivial, but as a kid, I could only get Leonardo and Donatello, which were my 2 favorite turtles due to the NES game. Their weapons had much further reach and practicality to me, but I digress. So I'm going to take you around the store to show you as much as possible and perhaps throw in a few short memories of growing up with these iconic toys. So here we go. Starting off in the 80s horror movie action figures. I was surprised to see so much selection. I'm a huge fan of The Thing. To me, it's probably the best classic horror movie ever made, with spades of paranoia and examining how people treat each other when anyone can be a potential killer. And of course, Kurt Russell rocked the 80s. We've also got plenty of other awesome movie figures here, from Jaws, Predator, and Aliens, and so on. I've mentioned in another video that Gremlins is one of the most 80s icons you can think of. Gremlins 2 was a perfect example of how studios didn't care how crazy a script was, as long as it had fun stereotypes and brand deals. Studios would keep churning out the craziest movies. I think the Key and Peele skit making fun of how Gremlins 2 was greenlit was spot on.
Everybody here gets to design their own gremlin.
Moving on, you have all the comic book heroes from DC, Marvel, and so on. I'm going to be 100% honest here. The only comic book hero I ever really cared about was Batman, and maybe Iron Man, because they created their so-called superpowers. I always felt that most heroes had their special power forced onto them by incidents they couldn't control, like Spider-Man being bit by a spider, or Superman being born with what's essentially invincibility. Unless you have kryptonite lying around, which is like never, and I could go on and on. I did have some Superman PJs as a little kid, but I liked the idea of flying around, and that's why I wore them. Anyway, I'm telling you this not to diminish any fandom over these characters, but to let you know I'm not really qualified to speak with authority on them. Having said that, they're very much part of any retro toy store collection, so I'm not going to leave them out. I hope you can appreciate that. And yes, I realize there are exceptions to what I just said. I promise you, I have nothing against these characters. I just prefer Batman and Iron Man. Moving on to Star Wars, this is a franchise I am much more familiar with. I really wish I had more of these toys growing up. I was born in '81, so I was just at the tail end of the movie trilogy when I was learning how to dress myself. I loved these movies as a little kid, but kind of forgot about them as soon as Nintendo, Ninja Turtles, and G.I. Joes entered the scene. Having said that, I'm finding a special place in my heart for many of the Star Wars toys. I even purchased this Cassian Andor toy for my son one Christmas when we went to see Rogue One at a theater in Lake Tahoe. It was a great memory, and I felt like that movie, more than any of the new ones, captured the spirit of the original trilogy and what it was like getting toys based on the film. It was also nice seeing this original Millennium Falcon in the collection. It's my son's favorite ship in the series, and certainly one of mine too, as you can see from this other video we made on our other channel. My favorite would have to be Luke's X-Wing. I just love the way those ships looked. Moving along, we can see all kinds of random franchises like this Gundam Wing, Dragon Ball Z, and Robotech. It was nice to see that some of the video game figurines from series like Tomb Raider, Castlevania, and even Turok showed up. I didn't even know Turok had collectibles like that. Down in the glass cases, there were all kinds of fun stuff. What caught my attention was the retro Lego sets. I wanted this pyro ship so bad as a kid. I had the Pirate Island or whatever it was called and wanted the ship to go along with it, but it never happened. So just seeing that was a treat. I also saw a lot of McFarlane toys from comic books like Spawn, Witchblade, and Fathom. My friends and I really liked the art style of McFarlane and decided to draw some of our own depictions of the characters. Here are some of the drawings I did in high school, which bring back some fond memories. Further down, you can see this awesome classic AT-AT and Darth Vader collectible. The AT-AT seems so impractical as a battle vehicle, but it's still so fun to think about one of those trudging over the ice planet Hoth or taking Vader to meet Luke on Endor. Things didn't have to be practical to be fun, and I miss that about the 80s and 90s. It was interesting to find these Major League Baseball figures. I used to collect baseball cards like crazy, and I still remember the taste of that rock-hard gum that came in baseball card packages. Here's a real find though. This G.I. Joe jet and some of the other retro G.I. Joes here are perfectly 80s. I remember a boat I had with tiger stripes on it and missiles, while other kids had rubber duckies and scuba guys for bath toys. I had a G.I. Joe boat with missiles, which was just awesome. I also remember visiting a friend's house who was an only child, and they spoiled the heck out of him with this G.I. Joe aircraft carrier. Seeing that as a kid really blew me away. I don't think I've ever seen a toy that big, and so that was just a really memorable day. Now, a lot of you probably remember Transformers. Of course, they're still making movies about them today, so it's one of those franchises that will probably be with us for decades more. I only had a couple of these growing up, and they were given to me as gifts. I think one morphed into a semi-truck and the other morphed into a jet. It was cool, but sometimes as a kid, I'd forget to morph them properly and I'd get frustrated, like it was this mini Rubik's Cube, and then I'd lose interest. Anyway, there's a great show about how Transformers came into existence called The Toys That Made Us on Netflix. It's worth checking out. Here you can see a lot of wrestle figurines. That's also a collection I don't have authority to speak on. I always thought wrestling looked kind of fake, but I get why some people like to watch it. It's simple fun. Of course, you already know I love the Ninja Turtles. And speaking of earlier, how superheroes had their powers given beyond their control, that's true of the Turtles and the Toxic Ooze. But they didn't take it for granted. Splinter was always training them and scolding them for not training harder, so I feel like it's still earned. But anyways, they had some great stuff here like that collector's case, which is now crazy expensive, the Amazing Turtles van, and all kinds of various figures, including the Ronin series, but it sounds like a darker version of the OG Turtles, and from what I heard, there's only one turtle left. It might fit with our modern dark hero vibe, but I miss the upbeat nature and playfulness of the 80s Turtles. They didn't care too much about getting serious. They partied and ate pizza when they fought the Foot Clan. I also saw some Jurassic Park figures next to the Turtles, and I love those movies as well. Speaking of movies, there's a bunch of movie-themed toys here. You gotta have Back to the Future stuff if you're gonna have a retro toy store, and they had it. Gotta love the Doc, he's always inventing things. There's a lot of E.T. stuff too, and that movie, as corny and odd as it may seem to today's kids, will always hold a special place in my heart for giving kids like me a limitless imagination. And don't get me started on the John Williams musical score. It's the best. You also had RoboCop, which I didn't see the movie growing up, but played the games and I loved them. They had a great figurine here. Also, you can see Knight Rider and the mix of action figures. That was a fun show. I really liked this version of the Terminator. It had a vibe based on the Nintendo game, and as terrible and as difficult as that game was, it's what I had. And when I finally beat the game, it felt like a huge accomplishment. What's also cool is a Stranger Things set. It's such a fan service for 1980s kids, and you know what? It works. We loved Ghostbusters and Trick or Treating, and Stranger Things combined those two things in season 2 and reminded us what it was like to be a kid, after dark, hanging with our friends. Good times. Aliens is another movie I liked. I would say that would be my favorite horror movie, maybe more than The Thing, but I feel like it's also very science fiction based. Well, I guess both movies are, but maybe it's the aspect of The Thing being on Earth and aliens in space. I don't know. Either way, they are both great sci-fi/horror films. That's the takeaway. They also had this Vanessa figurine from the Austin Power movies. I had such a crush on Elizabeth Hurley back in the 90s. I can safely say this figurine does not do her any justice. The Simpsons collection here is especially nice. There's even these cool looking dioramas. It's funny to think back on how many parents hated the show because of its controversial depiction of a cartoon family. Man, if they only knew how crazy things would get in our world today. To the side of that, you have some more Transformers toys and Power Rangers. It's a funny thing about Power Rangers. At first, I didn't like them because I babysat a kid who loved them so much, he thought he was a Power Ranger. He was constantly trying to karate chop me and kept throwing hard plastic toys at me while making ninja sounds. I couldn't respond in a negative way because, of course, I was a good babysitter. But anyways, it left a bad taste in my mouth. Later, I had a friend who loved the series and showed me some episodes. I thought they were so cheesy, but we both thought the Pink Ranger was hot, so we'd watch them anyways. Funny how low our bar was for entertainment when we were kids. Lastly, we have the section intended for little girls. I say intended because I realize some men play with My Little Ponies, and you'll see those toys in a little bit here. I personally don't get it, but people like what they like. There were a lot of Barbies here, and I actually do remember playing with a barbecue set from my sister's Barbie dream house. I love to barbecue now, and even did as a kid, so I guess I did play with Barbie stuff once. So there you go. Barbie is like G.I. Joe in the sense that there were hundreds of figures to choose from, so they did really well for themselves. Here you can see all the retro My Little Ponies, and I think my wife still has a few of these lying around. She really loved them growing up, and the company's decision to make bright colored ponies and not just natural colors was a smart move. Last thing was strawberry shortcake, and my sister had these toys as well. I did like the artificial strawberry smell in the room during the 80s. My room did not smell like strawberries. Whatever it smelled like, I'm sure it wasn't as nice. So there you go. There certainly was some more inventory than what I showed you, but that was most of it, and I really appreciated them letting me grab some footage of the store so I can show you guys and gals some great memories. I also plan on showing you the finished classic Ninja Turtle collection in the future, so stay tuned for that. If you want to see a cool Ninja Turtles arcade lunchbox, you can click on the link above or watch any of our other videos. And with that, I hope you have a totally radical day.
That was some seriously good nostalgia. But remember, friends, it's also important to make new memories with your loved ones.
Do, 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 do.